It's breakfast time on a Monday morning in Copenhagen. In a former gunpowder warehouse, 25 strangers are getting to know one another over Ethiopian coffee, Danish pastries, and heaping bowls of honey granola. If it feels like the first day of school, well, that's because it is. Welcome to the Mad Academy, a new type of hospitality school conceived by Noma's René Redzepi and headquartered in the heart of the Danish capital.
Do you want to take over, Magnus?
Yes.
A familiar figure draws the focus of the room.
Talk a little bit about practicalities.
It's Magnus Nilsson, the acclaimed Swedish chef who's now the director of the Mad Academy. And to his right is Shannon-DiPietro, the executive director of MAD, the Academy's non-profit parent organization. Nielsen, of course, needs little introduction. For years, he ran Faviken, a Michelin-starred restaurant in northern Sweden that became a byword for destination dining and starred in season 1 of the Netflix show Chef's Table. To start the week, Nielsen poses a suitably inspirational question.
So, why are you here? Think about that now.
Well, I know why I am. I want to learn more about the MAD Academy. What little I do know is that MAD began as a symposium in 2011, gathering internationally renowned chefs for thought-provoking conversations around food, and that the MAD Academy launched in 2019. But I'd also heard that its ambition was to change the hospitality industry, and I wanted to find out how. So for this episode of The Recipe, I dusted down my satchel, sharpened my pencils, and went back to school.
We're so glad to see you.
The course kicked off with a session run by the Academy's program director, Ed René, followed by a card game based on the definition of words related to sustainability, an exercise designed as an icebreaker for the mostly young, mostly international students.
Greenwashing is portraying an overly positive image of the organization.
That's got to be that.
Yes.
While they did that, I took a peek at the curriculum and noted that the students would soon be learning, among other things, about sustainable food systems, stakeholder mapping, and how to communicate their sustainability goals. And when the next class started, I tracked down Shannon-DiPietro and asked her to explain the method in the madness.
The programming is born out of the belief that everyone in hospitality can and should dare to make a difference for the world, to help with our biggest challenges. And mad as a word, if you're living in Denmark, you expect us to say mel, which is the Danish word for food. But we say it mad, even though we know the right pronunciation. But what we're after is that feeling of mad in the English language, that we're wildly passionate about something, that we are also a little bit fed up with the status quo. And so these programs are about making change. They're about transforming the food system. They're about transforming hospitality.
How does that translate into the structure and the courses? Right? What are the courses and how does it operate as an academy?
To make change, I feel that everyone needs tools, they need skills, they need knowledge, and they need a network, right? They need a group of people who are working with them. And so what we do here is gather the relevant information and develop approaches that are best in class for the hospitality industry and create 5-day intensive programs, first in environment and sustainability, and the other in business and leadership, to help these students, people with 7 to 10 years of experience in the industry, or in our more senior programs, 15 to 20 years experience in the industry. We gather them together to give them that relevant knowledge so they can go feel empowered and make change.
Hello everyone, good to see you all today. Yes, my name is Douglas McMaster.
As you might expect, MAD has little trouble attracting talented and influential speakers. The week I visited, the guest lecturers were Princeton research scholar Timothy Searchinger and Douglas McMaster, the British chef and founder of Silo, the world's first zero-waste restaurant.
Tried a little bit and did a little bit. It's better than one person doing a lot. So just these small actions really do add up to
I sat in on Douglas's class, which covered everything from composting to cooking with invasive species. And after class, I asked him about his role at the Mad Academy.
I've been part of the curriculum for the last couple of years, and I talk about innovation and the ups and downs of that innovation, and how we can, as individuals, be disruptive in kind of slightly negative food systems, and apply ourselves to innovate and make the food system better. It's like a metacognition. It's like if everything we were aware of was in a bubble, it's to be outside of the bubble and see all of the other bubbles, perspective. It's seeing the world differently so they can interpret it in a much more sophisticated and more educated way. Again, like if you don't know a problem exists, then you can't innovate on it. You can't do it. And this is giving them a perspective in the same way so they can design their lives, their careers, their businesses, their systems around a greater perspective. Could you not have a bin? That was the very profound thing that he said to me. I said yes. I have no idea what he was talking about, but I was so impressed by this guy that I was like, yes, and I spent the rest of this last decade trying to not have a bin.
It was clear how different the course was for a hospitality school. So I wanted to find out more about the kind of students the Academy is trying to attract. According to Melina, it currently runs courses 16 times a year, with places for 25 people on each course. Given MAD's ties to Noma, I imagine the application process is rather competitive.
It is competitive. The very first time we announced the program for that pilot in 2019, we had 3,000 applications for 20 spots. We haven't even yet been able to provide seats for those 3,000 people, and every day we receive new applications. That said, I want the people listening to your podcast to apply. We know there's a need and a demand, and you might be the person we're looking for.
It's not just about teaching knowledge and facts so much as getting conversations going and having kind of competing dynamics, I guess, over the course of the week, and having people from different sectors within the hospitality industry come together and share ideas. So are you trying to evaluate not just the individual, but how the dynamics of a particular 20-person course is going to run, or how do you decide who's going to attend?
Good question. Well, since you're British and I'm American, I will share that we've discovered in every group there should be a few Brits or a few Americans or some combination of those to start the week off with some energy. Our people are fearless about talking. Opinionated. That's
Not always right.
That said, we shouldn't have all Brits and all Americans. So
Contrarian. Yeah.
That's right. So when we're evaluating, one, they do have to be working actively in hospitality, and that it would surprise you how many applications we get from, for example, former Microsoft engineers wanting to make a career change. I'm glad those people are interested in food systems. They're not our target. Second, we're looking for that track record. That doesn't mean the fanciest restaurants. What that does mean is you've continually shown that you're committed to your workplaces, that you're pushing hard in your job, and that in your application, you share with us some of what gets you fired up about the work and about making change in this industry. On top of all that, yes, we are looking for a really important balance in our groups. We want there to be good representation from front and back of house. We think that communication bridge, that respect on both sides of kitchen and dining room are essential for the future of the industry. We're looking for a good mix of geographic backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, and we're looking for a good mix of men and women. We've got to start somewhere in correcting for how few women we have in senior leadership positions, and one way is right away from the beginning of people's careers to give them the skills for leadership and the ability to talk about those challenges.
And then tell me about the kind of the pedagogical structure. I was just in a classroom, but I don't imagine for 1 minute that in this industry with this academy, they're in there for terribly long.
You're right. Over and over again, people have said to me, look, no one wants to sit in a classroom all day. Or they've said people who work in hospitality don't want to sit in a classroom all day. And, I grew up at traditional institutions and I didn't want to sit in a classroom all day. I think some of our best learning happens through our hands, it happens through our hearts, it happens through seeing change in action. And so the curriculum is really, it's both experimental and highly practical. So students are experiencing a variety of field trips, lectures, workshops, case studies that get them thinking and demanding, putting the pressure on them to make changes in imaginary restaurants.
Indeed, the week I visited, the students were taken to an organic pig farm, to a nearby waste-to-energy plant, and to a dense forest outside Copenhagen, where they foraged for wild plants. But they also popped up the road to Matt Orlando's renowned restaurant, Amass.
Maybe fill up the front seats first. Yeah, so move up front. There's 3 tables, and then the kiddie tables, aka the teachers.
There, Matt and Amass's R&D chef, Maximilian Bogenman, introduced the students to about a dozen novel ingredients cooked up at Amass, from cacao-free chocolate to tomato garum to pumpkin seed oil and vinegars.
The commitment after the last lockdown when we reopened that we were no longer going to use citrus or lemon.
What was clear afterwards was that it wasn't so much the ingredients themselves that had impressed the students as the mindset behind them.
I'm so inspired. Yeah, this was something extra.
That's Klaus Lindberg, who runs a contemporary Swedish restaurant in central Stockholm. And on the short walk back to the Mad Academy, he told me how he had found the week so far.
This is something really good. And so much information packed in 1 week. It's fantastic. Getting home every night, I'm exhausted because it's been so much information just shoving it into you. It's so nice to meet people with the same values and same ideas, and we're pushing each other, and it's so inspirational to hear what the other people in our class are doing, because they're working hard with their stuff back home. So this is a great opportunity to make change.
Of course, another Swede who knows all about change is Magnus Nilsson, the Mad Academy's director. For years, he enjoyed success as the chef at Faviken. But for all the awards and accolades, it was how he improved the working conditions at the restaurant that meant the most to him. And it's a story he likes to tell on the first morning of the Academy's leadership and business course.
I started Faviken when I was 24, perhaps too young, definitely too immature and too unexperienced for that type of responsibility of running a team in that kind of restaurant. I never really reflected on it back then, but it wasn't a nice place to work. We worked too many hours, it was not a particularly supportive environment. We didn't even make staff food back in the very beginning. It was like, if you're hungry, there is yogurt in the fridge, and let's get back to work. It was that type of environment. And little by little, that just started feeling very strange. And we came to a point where I felt that I couldn't work that way anymore. Like, I couldn't work 70, 80 hours a week. All of these things that in many lines of business are taken for granted, and that quite frankly should be taken for granted. And I spoke to my sort of closest co-workers at the time, and we all felt the same, and we decided that we were going to, try to change that somehow. We started by addressing work time, and we decided that we were going to have 40-hour work week scheduled with a 10-hour absolute cap of overtime, and that all overtime was going to be fully paid. And this sounds very normal to someone who doesn't work in restaurants, but it's not. It's very unusual in restaurants. So to force ourselves to do this, we actually unionized the restaurant on the initiative of us, like the restaurateurs, which is very, let's say that they were very surprised when I called like the local restaurant workers union and asked if we could, I said that I have this restaurant and I would like to unionize it. Soon enough, we got to the point where people actually did work 40 hours per week. And on occasion, someone worked a few extra hours and then they were fully paid. And it made such a huge difference. And while this was going on, we also started addressing these sort of less easily defined things that we perceived as issues or problems, how people behave to one another, whether we were actually a supportive work environment for a team. But we started trying to figure out how we were going to be the place where we wished that we had worked when we worked in someone else's restaurant, essentially. It was a gradual change, of course, and what made us want to continue was that very quickly I saw results. You know, when people started working less and when we started being just better at treating one another well, taking care of our team and taking care of one another, people also stopped leaving. And going from this place where if you stayed for, I don't know, 9 months, you were basically a superhero, to a place where people just didn't want to leave unless they got a really, really cool offer somewhere else, maybe. That was very encouraging to see that, like, you know, the things we did actually had that type of effect. And when I did the last payroll, I really understood like how impactful these changes have been, because there were a lot of people who worked here for like 7, 8, even 9 years, and there was almost no one that had worked here for less than 2.5 years. I think it was really a wonderful confirmation on the fact that it does work, you know, and it's not that difficult. It's about deciding that this is important, and it's not just important to me, it's important to the general trajectory of development in the whole hospitality industry. And for us, like what I also saw was that the restaurant was more profitable after these changes had been put in place. The restaurant was a much nicer place to work in for everyone, including me as the restaurateur and manager of it. I regret that we didn't do it earlier, to be honest.
To the disappointment of many diners who had Faviken on their bucket list, Magnus closed the restaurant in late 2019 and then planned to take some time off. But René Redzepi and Melina Shannon-DiPietro had other ideas. They invited him to lecture at the Mad Academy, and that soon morphed into a role as its director.
When we have students, part of what I do is to interact with them, and like one of the things that I know that I can offer is sort of the real life experience of having run a restaurant for quite a long time, and then on a kind of bigger level, like the strategic thinking about what Mad Academy should be and how we should achieve that is like largely what I do.
Tell me what you think makes the Mad Academy so special.
I think that what makes Mad Academy special, more so than anywhere else, is that this education is meant for those who actively work in hospitality. Most sort of higher education for people in hospitality, it's kind of designed for those who don't want to be in hospitality anymore. If you look at most hospitality colleges and you look at the people who go to those, not that many of them ever go back to working actively in kitchen and dining halls again. And I think that that's fine, because they might do other great things and they might sort of fast track direct into higher management, for example. But we also need to equip those who actively work, the people who actually picks up the phone and orders produce, and the people who actually do the payroll or hire. We need to educate also those on making better choices.
Leadership's about providing direction, I think, in 4 different areas. So can you
Indeed, at the Mad Academy, students learn how to reduce waste, plan for the kind of crisis that could ruin a restaurant, and be better leaders. A case in point is the class taught by consultant Deborah Mattsson-Clark.
My work is about helping people to achieve things they didn't think they could. And whether that's as individuals, or as leaders, or as teams, or even as organisations, it's helping them get clear about who they want to be, where they want to be, how they want to be, and then taking them on the journey to get there. And particularly the hospitality industry has never given itself the luxury or the time out to do that sort of work. And they allow things to happen that wouldn't be acceptable in other industries. We're going to put these 2 exercises together, the communication culture and the psychological safety.
In Deborah's class, which is given as part of the Leadership and Business course, she leads students through a series of workshops designed to get them thinking about group dynamics, communication styles, and effective leadership.
What we're hoping for is that the more people that do it, the more there becomes this sort of pressure within the industry for change. A lot of change management specialists think that change has to come from the top. But I've seen fantastic changes coming when you get a sort of tidal wave coming up from the bottom. It doesn't mean it has to be a revolution, but just, not accepting the traditional way of doing things. One of the nicest quotes we had, which was quite a recent one, was from a woman who said that she came in the morning thinking that this was a luxury, and she left at the end of the day thinking this is essential.
On the strength of what I heard and saw, I don't think there's any doubting the necessity of the Mad Academy. The question is, how does it know it's having any impact?
It's actually quite difficult, and there are two ways of seeing it. And one is that in the same way as when you run a restaurant, you can feel the room and you can see whether you reach people, and you can kind of gauge whether they're having a good time or perceiving that they're getting something out of something. And that's easy. That's just about being present when you're here. But the more difficult thing is to measuring the actual impact, and that's difficult and something that we're trying to actively do here. But that's also it's a bit too soon, because we've had students for about 2 years now. We're now for the first time beginning to see that we can collect actual data that shows that what we're teaching here actually makes a difference.
Melina picks up the thread.
The data is coming. I'm impatient for it, of course. What I hope we'll see is that these restaurants are more financially viable, that people stay at them longer, the turnover is lower, that the people retiring out of them have better lives going forward. And, of course, that in every front, their practices are more sustainable. Better water taps, different energy-efficient appliances in their kitchens, purchasing from the right farmers nearby.
An example of this kind of impact can be found almost 300 kilometers away in a small town called Handsholm.
My vision is how can we change the food culture so we stop importing produces from everywhere, from around the world? How can we start eating what's produced right next to us?
That's Emilia Kvist, the owner of Melvin, a small fish restaurant on the west coast of Denmark. After stints at René and Amass, she was working at Dan Barber's restaurant, Blue Hill at Stone Barns, when she heard about the Mad Academy and applied for its environment and sustainability course.
What I learned the most from Mad was how everything is connected. So it's not just important that you think about the suppliers for the greens. You also have to think about the electricity, the experience, and also the staff, of course.
Not long after attending Mad, Emilia launched Melvin and hopes it can inspire others.
What change do you want to see in the world? Be the change. And my dream is as well, more places like Melvin will open, and not by me, but by everyone else who sees this as a great example.
In that respect, Emilia's restaurant epitomizes the ambition of the Mad Academy. Melina again.
So when I think about a young person coming through our doors, they have their entire career ahead of them. If we can change their mind or their mindset and the skills they have to address these challenges, not only do they make changes in every working day of their life, but they influence their colleagues, they influence their customers. So I think there's a big ripple effect.
Waste is a symptom of a broken system.
Douglas McMaster is similarly adamant about the Academy's ability to change ways of thinking. In his class, he tells students that it wasn't until he was working in what he calls a dungeon of a kitchen that he realized the food system was broken.
I do what I do because I had an understanding, I was going to say vision, but I had an understanding of why waste exists. And it's a symptom of a broken system. And that when you realize that something's wrong, it becomes hard to ignore.
And he maintains that had he been able to attend the Mad Academy earlier in his career, it would have set him down the right path much sooner.
It's so typical to follow pathways that are formed by society. As a chef, you aspire to have Michelin stars because all the other restaurants have Michelin stars or are aspiring to have Michelin stars. But there is another thing to aspire to be. This is a new pathway, and the Mad Academy forges new pathways, or it doesn't forge them. It makes the students aware that those new pathways can be forged.
Of course, there are some who suspect that the Mad Academy is something of a branding exercise for Noma, a smokescreen for any criticism of the restaurant. Magnus Nielsen counters this by describing the broad church of hospitality workers the Academy is trying to attract as part of its bona fide mission to change the industry.
We've really been very careful to set up the classes in such a way that we have a distribution of where people come from. So some people might think that it's mostly going to be super motivated people working in the very most ambitious fine dining restaurants from, various countries, which is not the case. There's going to be, like in a class of 25, there's going to be, 3 or 4 of those. And then there's going to be someone who manages the food in a really big hospital somewhere. And then there's going to be someone who works in a canteen and someone who manages their owned coffee shop. And it is a real mix of people with different backgrounds. And yeah, they're all motivated, and perhaps they know more than the average because they're choosing to come here. We want to be the place that teaches those who wouldn't necessarily get access to that knowledge if they didn't come to MAD. And most importantly, I think that maybe half of what people get out of MAD Academy is directly from our programming. It's what we can teach them. And then the other half is that we connect them to one another. That someone who works at one of the world's most ambitious restaurants in some country somewhere can spend 5 days doing a case study together with someone who runs the food and beverage operation in a large hospital in an entirely different country. And I think that's the main thing, really.
MAD's diversity is impressive, but it should also be noted that with courses costing 37,000 Danish kroner, about $5,000 US, many would-be students must struggle to afford their place, much less take 5 days off work. Then again, thanks to MAD's funding model, more than half of the spots on every course are given to scholarship students, which means that each year, MAD covers the full tuition for more than 200 people. Here's Melina again.
I would love it if we could give every student who wanted a scholarship one of those. And we're super fortunate. There's a set of generous donors and grantors like the Ministry of Food in Denmark who believe in hospitality's potential to accelerate the green transition and who also see that many of the industry's practices when it comes to well-being, sustainability, finance are antiquated, and they want to make those changes. And they love the pleasure of a dining experience. So they see us as one vehicle for making that change.
Tahini and shrug. So the shrug is like a Yemenese chili paste with coriander.
Speaking of dining, there is, as you would expect, great food served at the MAD Academy. The week I was there, chefs from a string of acclaimed local restaurants swung by to serve lunch, including from the Mexican Cantina Sanchez, the ramen joint Slurp, and the veggie bistro back at the Basque. There's no doubting then that the MAD Academy is nourishing its students in every possible way. And with every class it runs, it is slowly but surely helping to change the hospitality industry. The only question is, how big can it get?
It can be huge because, there is a need everywhere where people give hospitality and run hospitality-related businesses.
Right now we're running programs every other week, so we could double the size right away. Of course, we have dreams of doing some programming online, and our Mad Mondays and our symposium, which bring groups together either in different cities or larger groups right here in Copenhagen, those are activities I want to consider. Everyone in hospitality could be part of this. There's 8 million people working in hospitality in Europe. It's a big number.
You've been listening to The Recipe. This episode was written, produced, and hosted by me, James Clasper, for Superb. You can find out more about the MAD Academy by visiting madfeed.co. Head over to superbexperience.com for many more podcast episodes, interviews, and blog posts about the restaurant industry. And stay tuned to The Recipe for an extended interview next month with Douglas McMaster. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, then why not share it with your friends, family, or colleagues? Many thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.